important time. We're having the inevitable issues with tech, I'm afraid. So Paula Barker has been unable to join us. She was going to chair. So you're stuck with me, I'm afraid. My name's Joe. I'm a political officer for Labour Unions. It's really great to see you. So just to set up this conversation, we've got a fantastic lineup of trade unionists, frontline workers, and front bench politicians. Like I say, it couldn't be a more important time to set up this conversation. So in March this year, Rishi Sunak promised an end to low pay, but now there's rumours that he could even freeze the minimum wage at the comprehensive spending review on Wednesday. No doubt you would have also seen that there's rumours that he will be freezing pay for public sector workers. That's on top of years and years of austerity. You know, average pay in the public sector is still below 2010 levels. For those on furlough, obviously the minimum wage isn't even a minimum. It's 80%. So together we need to rebuild a more equal society after the pandemic, where every worker has job security, safe working conditions, a strong collective voice, a real living wage and fair pay. That's what we're here to do. That's what we're here to talk about this evening. Thank you so much for everyone that's joining us. First up, fantastic speaker, of course, Chair of TULO, General Secretary of ASLEF, Mick Whelan. Over to you.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening, everybody. Let's not forget, prior to the pandemic, we had problems. We had 10 years of austerity. We had a situation where 20% of employees were paid below the living wage. Low-paid workers were less than likely, when in furlough, to be paid. And then people are living on £95 a week or less. There's 3 million people excluded currently that are self-employed, that are struggling desperately. But let's not even go further than that. That people living in poverty were over 40%. And in that, 56% of those people living in poverty were living in households where people were working. And some people on average were working 48 hours a week. So we had a real problem. And the two problems to be addressed there were work doesn't pay and people couldn't afford their rent. So we have either got poor employers who are benefiting from income support, that people supporting people that are working for them, or we've got people that can't afford and have to make decisions between food, heating, right, and paying their rent and surviving. And let's not forget, the temporary measures of non-eviction may end very shortly when COVID ends, and we will have people destitute, whole families out on the street, and that can't be right. So this isn't just about what's going to happen about post-COVID. These are all the wrongs we've got to right from pre-COVID that we were seeking to do so in our last manifesto and driving forward. Of course, the most frightening figure of all, of course, is that 7 in 10 children that are in poverty that are in a working family. That doesn't just hurt the fact that you don't eat well. It doesn't hurt the fact that you can pay £16.5 billion to the military, but you won't spend £20 million on food for kids at Christmas, unless a famous footballer stands up and blackmails you into it and forces you to do it. That doesn't change the fact they still haven't done that. What they've done is juggle the figures and put the onus on councils that are struggling to do other things at this major time of crisis. Of course, we've got 800,000 care workers that are on less than the living wage, or less than the London living wage of £10.75 an hour. The average care worker earns £8.10 an hour. And just let's break that down again, because the average care worker doesn't get paid travelling between jobs. So you go into people's homes, or you go into a home, and if you have to go to more than one location, the time that you spend travelling, you don't get paid for. When did we ever get to a world where work doesn't pay? That's without the gig economy. That's without the flexibility, or the alleged flexibility, of 0 hours contracts. Then let's not talk about nonsense about flexibility. If you don't know whether you can pay your wages, pay your rent, pay your food, look after your family, because if you don't know you're working next week, that's not flexibility, that's fear. And that's got to end. Of course, there were times in the dim and distant, if you went for a shift in a pub, if you were a student, and it was quiet at 7 o'clock in the evening, they sent you home. But they sent you home and paid you a full shift. In this day and age, you may pay to go to work. You've been at work for an hour and there's nothing happening. They send you home and they pay you for that hour. Again, how do you feed yourself? How do you pay your rent? How do you look after yourself? How do you drive things forward? The Low Pay Commission estimates over 2 million workers paid at below the minimum wage in April 2019, and around 7% of all UK workers. let's not also forget that work is going to get more precarious. When we come out the other side of this, there'll be people scrabbling around for those poor jobs in the gig economy, because many jobs won't exist in hospitality and those other areas we've come to rely on. We have a chance, we have an opportunity now to say to the government, and I say to you now because I've got wind up and I've got so much more to say to you, that 40% of our current debt is with the government can afford to carry that debt. If we can pay back the bankers' crisis over a number of years, we can pay back looking after our own people, feeding them, looking after them, and treat them with pay and dignity. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mick. Very powerful. Really, really great setup to the discussion, putting things in the larger context of not just the last 10 years, but over the last year as well. You know, low pay is an endemic problem, and it has been for the last 10 years. This didn't just start at the beginning of this crisis. This is just the latest of a series of crises that working people have faced under the Tories. And with that, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Angela Rayner, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party. Thank you so much for your time, Angela. Over to you.
Oh, thank you, and thanks for inviting me here tonight. And you know, Mick's got me all fired up. I'm really cheesed off, and I was cheesed off, and that's what got me involved in politics. So first of all, my message to everyone on this is stay involved and get active as much as you can. Don't just get cheesed off like me. Get active and do something about it. And you know, I came into politics through the route of my trade union because of all the things that was going on in my workplace. I was a home carer, so I was a manual worker. I come from the shop floor, and I saw how they were outsourcing care work in the council, and I'd only just gone into the council again, and they got paid travel time and they got trained, so we were better carers as a result of it as well. And the management just wanted to outsource, and I thought, what are they trying to do here? This is going to be disastrous. And it was the trade unions that were not just supporting its members, but trying to put a better society forward and support us in terms of getting things right. So this is what this is about to me. This putting wages back in our economy for the lowest paid. You know, the government are literally, Mick's just talked about care workers and the money they're on. These people are putting their lives on the line. All those key workers at the moment, whether it's the firemen, the care workers, the teaching assistants, the refuge collectors, the NHS workers, many have died because they've been doing their job. And yet they're not even worth a real living wage. They're not delivering them with the decency of having the means to which to feed their children. We don't want to go to food banks as carers. And why should they? And why can't the government afford to pay for it when, quite frankly, they're giving all of the millions away to their mates? It's like mates' rates, and it's not a way to run the country. So I'm really incredibly cross with what the government have done. And I'm really incredibly cross and agitated to make sure that we do something about it. And we show them in May, when next May are some big elections that are going on. And I know people think, well, you're just talking about elections, same old thing, political stuff. But it matters. It matters a huge amount, because these people, these charlatans that are in at the moment, are making life hell for people. And I can't, every breath I've got at the moment is about pushing towards looking after our key workers. Give them the money that they deserve. I don't think there's a member of the public at the moment that doesn't want them to have it. And I tell you what, it's the right for businesses as well. Our businesses need that support. Well, if people don't have money in their pocket, they're not going to be able to spend it in our local businesses. And you give it to a millionaire and they'll just squirrel it away in their tax havens like they do. It's not going to help our businesses on the high street. What helps businesses on the high street is when there's money in the economy for ordinary working people. And those carers and those frontline workers deserve that pay rise more than ever now. And I think we've all got to make sure that we keep pushing that. You can't just clap carers. You can't just clap our key workers. That's offensive. Sat there on your cameras outside number 10 and 11 giving it all this. It's offensive. Yeah, the general public have done more than our government has for these people that have put their lives on the line for us. So I'm really, really annoyed. I'm really annoyed because not only is it about pay, not only is it about fairness and decency, but as was said by Joe earlier, you know, they've decimated our public services. When we went into this crisis, we went into this COVID crisis in a really, really bad way. because the government had delivered 10 years of austerity. They had their own report telling them that they needed to look for a pandemic. They needed PPE. So they can't turn around now and say no one could have foreseen this coming. Not only did they foresee it coming, their report told them it was coming, and they cut our vital public services and left our front line without the support it needs. So my message tonight is solidarity. I'll always be a trade unionist. I got involved in politics, not to be a grubby politician, but to fight for the girls that I worked alongside and fight for those people, those elderly people that fought for our country, to give them dignity and respect in their old age. And, you know, this shower that's in at the moment have made me even more passionate about making that happen than before. And I apologise for calling one of them scum in the chamber the other day. But I've got to say, the reason I did that was because he said I was politicising the issue when they slashed the money and support to people in Greater Manchester and told us we weren't worth anything. Well, they politicised the North when they said that they were going to look after them and they were going to get Brexit done. Well, at the time, my aunt died of COVID that week. So when they said that I politicised it, it's not political. Everything that they've done has damaged our communities, damaged our class, and damaged our country. And we've got to do everything we can united together to fight back against that, support our communities and support each other. And that's why I'm here tonight, to say, get your fire in your belly, don't be down and out, get in there and get rid of this glory lot that are in at the moment. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you so much, Angela. I can tell you are very much fired up. And you're absolutely right that the public are with us on this. The public are with us. Let's fight in the workplaces and let's beat them at the ballot box. Next May, we've got an incredibly large set of diverse elections across all of our nations and regions. Let's get involved. You know, if that's my message to people watching, that maybe workplace activists, industrial activists, but they haven't taken that next step to become party activists, now's the time to do it, because we need to fight back politically and industrially. Thank you so much, Angela. Really, really appreciate your time. Next up, we've got Sian Elliot from the TUC. Now, I'm really glad Sian's with us, because low pay in this country, as it is in many nations, is incredibly gendered. Minimum wage workers are disproportionately women, and public sector workers are generally, or more than half of our public sector workers are women, and they will be hurt disproportionately by any pay freeze. So I'm really glad we've got you with us. Sian, over to you.
Thank you very much, Joe, and thank you, Mick and Angela, for those brilliant speeches. What an act to follow. But as you say, Joe, since the start of this pandemic, this government have failed women, they have failed disabled workers, and they've failed black workers, and they look set to fail them again now. It is women who stand to gain the most from a rise in the minimum wage, because women make up the majority of those on the lowest pay in the private sector. Those women working on insecure contracts without the protection and the rights at work that securely employed workers get. Protections that are and have been vital for workers in a health and economic crisis like this. And it's women, disabled workers and black workers again who lose out from a freeze to public sector pay, because they make up the majority of public sector workers. It's the lowest paid workers who have borne the brunt of this crisis too. Women and black workers on the front line, working on poverty pay, as nursery workers, in our supermarkets, cleaning in our hospitals, caring in our care homes, driving our buses, delivering us the food and groceries that are essential to sustaining life, keeping our country, our economy going and people alive. And of those key workers, the 1 million lowest paid, 99% are women. And it was women, working class, black and ethnic minority, disabled women and single mums who bore the brunt of austerity, shouldering a staggering 86% of cuts to public spending. It's women who are worse off now than they were a decade ago. So we cannot stand by while this government usher in austerity 2.0. And that's why us being here this evening is so important. We have to demand a rise in the minimum wage, a meaningful rise to the real living wage levels, so that workers are paid a wage they and their families can afford to live on. As Mick said, 2/3 of children growing up in poverty are living in working households. Raising the minimum wage is not just the right thing to do, it's the only thing to do. With the right conditions, we create more wealth for everyone. Government can plough money into business with schemes like the Eat Out to Help Out, but we know business hoards that wealth. Instead, by putting money directly in the hands of workers through a proper wage, in the hands of working families, that wealth is fairly redistributed because low-paid workers are the most likely to spend in our economy. They pay that money back in via taxes. We do the weekly shop, we spend in our local high streets, we pay the rent, the electric, we buy school uniforms, clothes for our children, we pay to get the bus or the train to work in our hospitals and care homes. And it's those workers who need us now. They need a pay rise. And that is where we unions and the Labour Party, we make all the difference. Because we know the best way to secure fair and equal pay is through stronger unions, more collective bargaining power. Because when workers are organised, we win for ourselves a fairer slice of the wealth that we help create. And when we are organised, united as a working class movement, we hold this government to account. We fight every sexist, racist, classist, ableist decision they make every step of the way, because that is how we trade unionists bring about change and how we win a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. Thank you very much, brothers and sisters.
Thank you so much, Sian. Incredibly passionate. And what that brought home to me is this is not just a moral issue; it's an economic issue as well. Having money in the pockets of working class people makes for a more resilient economy, one that will then create more jobs, create more growth, and help us to bounce back from this crisis even quicker. Thank you so much to you, Sian. Next up, Rehana Azam, you are National Secretary of the GMB. Over to you for your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you to Labour unions for organising this important and timely event. It's right that we find space to get across the anger that people rightly feel at the way this government is treating them. And I have to say, I am furious about the lives needlessly lost when we ask time and time again for PPE and safe systems at work. That the government simply refused to listen to us when we told them that their plan for track and trace wasn't going to work. That the government sent vulnerable people from hospitals into care homes to plant the seed of a virus that has left thousands bereaved. I'm incensed that despite challenging the government almost weekly over the disproportionate impact this virus has had on Black and Asian workers, they still aren't safeguarding us. But I'm struggling to put into words how I feel about the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak. He's trying to put the cost of the pandemic on the backs of those who've got us through it, telling us that our health and care workers, teaching assistants, our police staff, our refuse workers who have worked throughout this crisis, who've put themselves in harm's way, that once again they are going to make them pay. Well, not on our watch. The billionaire Chancellor looked down the camera and told us he would do whatever it takes. But what it takes is what? Workers having to pay the price. It used to be Osborne telling us we're all in this together. Now it's Rishi Sunak trying to pull the rug from underneath our workers. My union, GMB, put the Chancellor on notice back in May. We are mounting a mighty fight back and we need everyone to be part of it. They say they don't have the money for pay justice for our key workers who've gone above and beyond fighting this pandemic. But money has flowed freely from Treasury, huge piles of public cash straight into the pockets of their pals. £10.5 billion handed out without due process, and the National Audit Office saying that if you had political connections, you were 10 times more likely to get a contract. That includes 50 million masks that couldn't even be used. And then this week, with no sense of shame, the Tories tell millions of workers that they have to take the hit. This isn't a democracy, it's a disgrace. The pandemic didn't cause low pay, but the pandemic has shone a spotlight on the chronically underpaid. We've seen who the country relies on in a crisis, and the public has too. For the millions of workers and their families who need us right now, GMB stands with you. Your sacrifices will be respected. You're doing your duty, and it's time for the government to do theirs. In solidarity.
Thank you so much, Rehana. Very powerful, as ever. I think that an incredibly important point that you made, incredibly powerful point that you made, and you always make while you're on these platforms, is it's up to us. It's up to workers to fight back. It always is. We will have fantastic support from the Labour Party. We will have fantastic support from our Labour Party frontbenchers and every single Labour MP across our nations and regions, and our MSPs and our councillors. I hope, you know, we need the whole Labour movement together on this. But ultimately, as you always remind us, Rehana, it is up to us. It is up to us to build the trade union density in the workplace, to build that support, and to give workers the confidence to push back. So thank you so much for your time. Absolutely amazing as ever. Next up, I have on my list, and sorry about this, things are a little bit all over the place, but we're having to go with it. I've got Miriam Mafemba. Miriam, you're a nurse, but based in the northeast, aren't you? Can you tell us a little bit about what the last year or so has been like for you, and what it's been like for your colleagues?
Thank you very much for organizing this. I'm Miriam Mafemba from Newcastle, and I'm a proud member of Unison and activist. And it's been a tough year. That's all I can say for all of us. The Thursday night clubs, we've greatly appreciated. We all say that they were greatly appreciated. But as a single parent, they are not going to put food on the table. They are not going to put a roof over my household. As a Unison member, I know how much public service workers in health, local government, schools, and across the whole public sector have struggled due to a decade of austerity. And at the moment, it's just they're pitting the private sector workers against the public sector workers, the NHS workers against the public sector workers. And this is absolutely not right. We all deserve a pay rise, a good pay rise, and to be treated with respect. Pay has been cut whilst workloads have gone through the roof. Across the public sector, we are being asked to do more with less, and it is happening again. As a nurse, I work for the NHS, and the NHS in England is run in such a complex way that there aren't many direct changes that the Prime Minister can make that have an immediate impact. But one of the few levers he can pull is on the pay of the 1.3 million staff directly employed in our NHS. Since July, Unison has been asking the Prime Minister to give health staff an early and decent pay rise. And this will show staff that they are valued and that their contribution to fighting the pandemic is recognized. And this would also boost the morale of all the health workers. Unison is fighting for the contribution of all staff to be recognized and a minimum £2,000 added to everyone's salary. So many staff from all our occupational groups have gone above and beyond this year, and it is so important that all those contributions are recognized. The government has said that the NHS will not be included in the blanket freeze for other sectors, but they have not said what they will get or where the funding will come from. So if a pay rise for workers must come out of the existing budgets, then the patients will lose out. Unison is proud to be working with 13 other NHS trade unions to support the call for a pay rise for the whole NHS team, and we'll be hoping that the Chancellor is listening to the voice of health staff across the land when we call for him to invest in a decent pay rise for NHS staff for the sake of our members and the patients they serve. And we will continue through Unison to fight alongside those in the public sector who are facing the threat of further pay freezes. Care workers, teaching assistants, refuse collectors, all of them have faced hardships, and all of them have played a crucial role in the fight against COVID-19. Together in the NHS and across public sectors, we will keep on fighting for the pay rises we need and deserve. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Miriam. Thank you so much. I think you picked up on some really, really important things there and spoke incredibly powerfully. One is that we have to resist these Tory tactics of dividing public sector from private sector. We have to stand against these Tory tactics of dividing health workers from other public sector workers. We only win as a class, as a trade union movement, as a party, when we are united across the whole of the movement and across the whole of the class. Thank you so much for your time, Miriam. Thank you so much for everything you do. I hope to see you on one of our calls again soon. Thanks again, Miriam.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think next up we've got Jane Jones. Jane, thank you so much for your time. You're an Usdaw member and you're a retail worker. Over to you to give your speech, please.
Oh, hi, thanks very much, Joe. Good evening, everybody. I'm Jane Jones from Usdaw. I'm a union rep working in a supermarket. The fight for a real living wage is very important to me and my members. We don't take the national minimum wage for granted. We know that without it, many people's wages would be at risk. In the retail sector, thanks to years of union negotiations, many workers are now paid more than the minimum wage. But the reality is that the minimum wage sets a baseline for many workers, not those directly on it. A freeze to the national minimum wage rate would have dire consequences for millions of workers. And this year, of all years, we deserve more. This year, when workers like me and my members have been going to work every day, stacking the shelves and serving our communities, when we've been delivering groceries to the doors of people self-isolating and people in need, we deserve to be properly valued. I know the minimum wage isn't perfect. For a start, it's still not enough. We need a real living wage, and it should be at least £10 an hour for all workers, regardless of their age. In my workplace and in all supermarkets where Usdaw organises, I'm proud that we have got rid of age-related pay so that young people are paid the same as everybody else because they work just the same and just as hard as everybody else. But in many workplaces, 18-year-olds are earning just £6.45 an hour. That is wrong and it's unfair. They don't get a discount on rent for being under 25, so they shouldn't have a discounted wage either. But even with all its faults, the national minimum wage is still important and needs to be protected. It's been a terrible year, but we've all fought through it. We shouldn't have to fight to survive on low pay too. So I'm proud to join with you all today, because wherever we work, we need to work together to build strong unions in every workplace, to make our voices heard and to campaign together for a real living wage for every worker. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Jane. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. I think everyone on this call, everyone on this this event will recognise that retail workers have gone above and beyond. There are countless examples of that, of helping people through this crisis, whether that's, going the extra mile to make sure people are safe and comfortable, or, relaxed when they were apprehensive doing their shopping, or whether it's dropping things off on the way home or whatever it might be. There are countless stories of retail workers going above and beyond. And the very least we can do is provide a real living wage for all. The very least the government can do is provide a real living wage for all retail workers and all workers. So thank you so much for that. Who have I got up next? Holly, would you like to go next? Holly, you are a nurse in London, I believe, and you are a proud GMB member.
Yeah, that's it. Hiya. Thanks for having me here tonight. I'm really proud to be part of this. Yeah, I'm a nurse. I work in child and adolescent mental health services in the NHS, have done for about 10 years, and yet a proud GMB union rep as well. So thinking about how NHS services have been, especially over the last 10 years, I'd describe the decimation that we've experienced as workers as it's been absolutely brutal, really. Our waiting lists are always increasing. We're regularly faced with the situation of being no mental health beds in our country. We're caring for people living in increased levels of deprivation due to the cruelty this government is out to the most vulnerable in our communities. This year, however, as most people know, has been like nothing we've experienced before. And the government, we saw them come and stand out on the doorsteps clapping and saying they would give the NHS whatever it needs. But I'm telling you, on the ground, NHS workers, we haven't felt that at all. We've felt completely undervalued for years. Our morale has been absolutely on the floor. Yet everyone has just continued to step up this year together. We've worked with increased risk. Our colleagues have become sick. Our patients' dependence on us has increased all the time. And we've just done this together as a team, and we've got through it together. But really thinking about how things have been, not just this year, but over the past 10 plus years, it's no surprise we're faced with 40,000 nurse vacancies in the NHS when we've seen our pay cut by about a fifth. There's about 100,000 vacancies across the NHS, and a report said that's predicted to rise to about 250,000 by 2030. And I have to say, the thought of that absolutely terrifies me, because we're already on our knees. We're battling against unsafe staffing, which impacts our patient care and also impacts on physical and emotional well-being of our staff. So that's why, backed by GMB, NHS workers, we're fighting for a 15% pay rise or 2% per hour, whichever's greater for us, so that we can even go some way to begin to address that staff deficit, which is just massive. So we can ensure that we keep our patients and each other safe. Ensuring that our lower banded colleagues secure a real living wage is really critical to the future and the running of the NHS, because without them the whole system would fall, and it's simply not right. People are working 40 plus hours just to make ends meet. But we know why we're here tonight. It's not just about us NHS workers, and I really want to express solidarity to all who have done above and beyond for years, and this year have literally kept the country running. The government's failed to protect public sector workers this year, and already feeling devastatingly undervalued. What message is the country sending out to them? And we simply know the way this government have behaved this year, putting millions to their mates, we know that this isn't about resources. So I'm expressing solidarity of all public sector workers, because we know that when we unite and when we stick together, we can achieve incredible things. We created an NHS welfare state, built a society people want to be able to live in. It gives hope to each other and our families. And when we do that, and when we're going to stick together, not just nurses, but teachers, firemen, refuse collectors, people who are keeping our schools functioning, people who are keeping our children safe, people who are keeping supermarkets stocked, that is when we'll be able to have the kind of society we want. And that is why NHS workers aren't just backing pay rise for NHS workers, but for all of our public sector colleagues. And building on what everyone else has said, really, what we're seeing is we are seeing workers becoming organised. Workers are building power in their unions and increasing the pressure in fighting for exactly what we're owed. And we're united in doing that, and we're not going to be divided. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Incredibly powerful. And, you know, if there's a watchword coming out of everyone's contributions, it's solidarity, isn't it? It's solidarity amongst public and private, amongst NHS frontline and backroom staff. Everything, every cog in that wheel is absolutely vital to receiving the level of care that we hope for and we deserve as working people. Thank you so much. I mean, the other thing that I just wanted to pick up on in what you said, Holly, was that, you know, this isn't a cost-free option. You know, keeping down the pay of public sector workers is not a cost-free option. You know, it leads to dangerous levels of services, of understaffing, and has a knock-on effect all over the NHS and in terms of people's health and well-being. So you've brought that home really, really powerfully. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much. I'm going to move on now to Ian Woodland. Ian, how are you doing? Is everything okay tech-wise? Good stuff.
Thank you very much, Joe. Yes, I could have learned over the last 8 or 9 months about tech, but I'm still lagging behind. First of all, thanks, sisters and brothers, comrades. Thanks for the invite today. A lot has been said already in terms of what working class people and our members are facing. Massive challenges, redundancies, cut in pay, furlough pay, on top of working under conditions where the threat of COVID-19 is still lingering. It's still there, and we can see how bravely, I mean, we've heard today, retail workers and health workers, and with the struggles that they are facing at this stage. There's been a huge drop in pay for millions of workers in this country, and the only place where they can return to is through their unions and through their collective actions. And this has been intensified by the pandemic that we've had. On top of all this, we've seen the government now suggesting a pay freeze, a pay restraint for public sector workers, the very workers who were out there, you know, collecting our bins, clearing the streets, looking after our elderly, looking after you know, patients in care homes. All these workers, it's just like a real slap in the face. And I think we need a collective response. And every speaker that we've had have been saying the same thing. Our strength, not just our industrial strength, we need to build our political strength through our industrial strength, through our organising efforts in the trade unions. And I think it's so important to recognise that these demands that we're talking about, this campaign, this organising, is acutely political. It is acutely political. If an employer is taking away your pay, cutting your pay, if they're taking away your pension, if they're increasing your hours, these are all political moves because it affects your life. It affects your life of your family, and it affects the life of your communities. So we must be organised around this to fight back. And I use this fight back term not with any caution. We are in such a position now where many of our members now are sick to the back teeth the way they've been treated after so many years of austerity, only to be made and feel like it's their fault that we've got a COVID-19 crisis. That's the reality of it. And I think, you know, we need to build on our strength. It's already been mentioned how members, working people are joining unions now, and it's really, really welcome that this is happening. Every single union has been experiencing growth in membership, and we need to build on that. But we need to build on the politics as well. I mean, as members come in, we need to explain to them that while we can win things in the workplace, we also need to win things politically while in government. We need to develop, for example, the brilliant policies that have been developed between the unions and the Labour Party over the last 5 years, which were very, very evident in 2017 and 2019. I think we should be proud of some of those policies that will ensure a higher minimum wage, stronger trade union rights, and also the rights to sectoral collective bargaining. We need an increase in sectoral collective bargaining across the country. We need to be addressing the problems in the economy brought on by outsourcing and contractor and subcontracting in industry. We need to be supporting workers at the sharp end of the economy with a much stronger social security system. I mean, how many people listening today have been facing layoffs without pay if the furlough wasn't in existence? I think a vast majority would have been. Austerity and cuts in public services must end, and we need a political party in power to be able to stop that. But lastly, and I'll end on this, comrades, we need to be emphasising, and this really gets right under the skin of the Tories and their right-wing agenda. We need to be emphasises on collective aspiration of our class and our communities, and no more on individual aspiration, which is something that the Tories use so many times to try and knock back our collective efforts as trade unionists. So I'll end on that, Joe. There's more important speakers than me to speak, and I'll leave that to them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ian. Thank you so much. Very modest of you. Sorry, I didn't introduce you properly at the beginning. Ian Woodland, you're a national officer for Unite the Union. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. Some really, really important things there. I think you really got to the structural issues that are endemic in our political and economic settlement at the moment, which disadvantages working people, which makes low pay, precarious work the norm rather than the exception. And that's something that we can only respond to politically as a Labour movement, as a Labour Party, and making sure that we build support for the Labour Party and an alternative that works for working people. Thank you so much, Ian. Thank you again. Right, next up, I have Kate MacLeod. Kate MacLeod, you are a proud Usdaw member, a retail worker, and I am so pleased that you're with us. Over to you for your 3 minutes.
Thanks, Joe. Good evening, everybody. So my name is Kate. I work in the retail sector and I'm an Usdaw rep. I want to start by saying thank you to each and every one of the key workers speaking or watching this evening. You have done so much to help us through this crisis, and I send my solidarity to every single one of you. I think it's also important, though, that we talk about workers who've had a different experience in the crisis, workers who have been furloughed. I work in non-food retail, and our sector has been one of the hardest hit by the lockdown. Millions of retail workers have been placed on furlough. I was, and I am one of them. I remember the anxiety in the first lockdown trying to keep up with government announcements, and I'm still feeling that today. I remember how worried members in my workplace were about how they would get by. In organised workplaces like mine, the union was able to put pressure on employers to top up furlough pay to 100%. Many employers were unable or unwilling to do this, and once again, low-paid workers were hit the hardest. Over half of the low-paid workers were furloughed on reduced pay, and for higher-paid workers, this was fewer than 1 in 20. It's already a balancing act for shop workers on a minimum wage, and even a small drop in earnings can leave us struggling. A drop of 20% is a huge hit when rent, bills, and food all still have to be paid for. Pressure builds up as weeks go by, and too many people have been forced into debt. Over 2 million people drop below the national minimum wage while furloughed, and young workers have been disproportionately affected. They are more likely to be employed in sectors like retail, leisure, and hospitality, and more likely to be on a lower minimum wage rate. Recent lockdowns across the United Kingdom show furlough is going to be a fact of life for many of us for some time to come. All workers should have enough to live on. And once again, it's unions standing up for its members, demanding that government and employers do the right thing. Top up furlough pay to at least the minimum wage and increase the minimum wage to one that we can actually live on. We demand fair pay for key workers, for furloughed workers, and for every worker. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kate. You've raised the incredibly vital issue of furlough at 80%, which means for many of the lowest paid workers that are on furlough currently or have been on furlough over the course of the last 8 months or so, that's meant that they've been living under the national minimum wage. Now, the national minimum wage was always meant to be a floor. You know, at present, it's not at the level of a real living wage. 80% of the national minimum wage is not enough to pay housing bills, to pay food bills, and other expenses for working people. And the longer it goes on, the longer this pandemic is with us, and the longer that workers are furloughed, the more painful that becomes. So thank you so much for bringing that home. Really, really powerful.
Thanks, Joe.
Next, thank you so much. Next, I'm going to introduce Charlotte Faulkner. Now, Charlotte, you're an ambulance worker, GMB member. Thank you so much for your time and for being with us. Over to you.
That's okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Charlotte Faulkner. I'm a paramedic and I live in London. I'm a proud branch president for my branch with GMB and a proud activist for GMB. COVID has hit us all really, really hard. And I think that's one thing that everyone can join in. Whilst everyone has different experiences with it, it has all impacted our daily lives. It's impacted our NHS, our communities, our homes and our families. We have faced the fear of the unknown, and also unfortunately had to face the failings of the government. We, along with our union GMB and our colleagues, we fought for PPE, for appropriate PPE, which is still not in place. We were given out-of-date PPE by the government, by the NHS stores, and we locally have fought and managed to correct that. But unfortunately, colleagues across the country have not been able to correct this issue. Freezing our pay is not the way forward, and is not the way to thank those who have kept the country going, to thank the NHS, which was already on its knees before COVID started. We all know that there are always articles in the paper about how the NHS is struggling for mental health services, for adult services, for elderly care services, for care homes, for everything. And now it's really been absolutely pushed to their limit. The government haven't fought COVID and they aren't getting a pay freeze. It's only the NHS that have, and our key workers alongside them. Freezing their pay is still not going to be, in regards to our last pay deal that we had in our recent pay deal, it still wasn't reflective. It's still based on criteria from managers, it's subject to change. We still maybe not get it half the time. But even this pay deal that we're talking about, trying to reward or trying to thank those who have helped the country get through it, freezing it is not enough. GMB are asking for, as my colleague said before, my GMB colleague said before, we're asking for a 15% inflation or £2 per hour, whichever is greater, because we do not feel that having 1% for everyone is the same, because it's different depending on your banding. I would just like to thank everyone just to be able to give it a chance to speak on this platform, and just put out our thoughts and express our concerns. Please don't freeze our pay. Thank you.
I think I've come through now. Hang on.
I've got Anneliese Dodds on the phone as well, so that's who you can hear if you can hear her in the background. Although she said that she might be out of. Looks like she's coming through on the chat as well. So hopefully we'll see her soon. Thank you so much, Charlotte. I really appreciate your time. It's obviously been an incredibly difficult year. And I think, the thing that sticks in the craw of lots of us, I think, that support a pay rise, a proper pay rise for workers such as yourself, is that we saw the Prime Minister, we saw the Chancellor of the Exchequer stood outside Number 10, clapping on those Thursday evenings in the height of the pandemic, clapping our key workers. But now is the time to put their money where their mouth is. So you're absolutely right. Claps don't pay the bills. So hopefully we'll get Anneliese up very soon. It may be via the phone, but thank you so much, Charlotte. Hugely appreciated.
Thank you.
There's really strong voices.
Thank you so much, Anneliese. I know it's an incredibly busy week, so thank you so much to Anneliese Dodds there, Shadow Chancellor, for joining us. Thank you so much to everyone that's taken part in the rally. I think the watchword of this rally has been solidarity. Solidarity between all parts of the Labour movement, between our politicians, our front benchers, between those on the front line, between public and private sector. Solidarity is what we need. Solidarity is the only way that we're going to get through the next few months and years of this callous and incompetent Tory government. So thank you so much. Thanks again for everyone for tuning in. In terms of taking things forward, there's a few things that you can all do. One is sign the Labour Union's petition for a real living wage of at least £10 an hour. Email your MP. We have a model email for you to send to your MP to ask them to support a real living wage. That's on the Labour Union's website. Sign up to that. The Labour Party have a petition which was launched today, telling the government not to freeze public sector pay. There's a green button in front of you. You can click that and sign that petition. That would be absolutely fantastic. And as ever, be as active